So his story, let's react. He started 5 months ago. And let's watch one of his
Thunder shook the gas station windows, and the lights flickered, and I grabbed the counter. The fluorescence steadied, and I exhaled.
This is actually addicting. I'm subscribed to him. He actually makes really good stories. Go subscribe to him. He's actually really good. I'm being for real.
16 and pulling a solo shift because the other guy called in sick. The storm had been building for an hour, and every time the thunder cracked, the lights blinked, and the dread punched through me. I paced past the fire extinguisher on the wall for the 10th time. A box of zip ties sat on the shelf under the
Awesome.
counter next to the scissors. I counted the register twice to keep busy and slid the drawer shut, and every light on the block died at the same time. The register died, and the coolers stopped, and I grabbed the counter because the dark was instant and total. I yanked out my phone, and the screen said, "Citywide power outage." My boss had already texted, "Stay put, lock the doors." I locked the front door and paced behind the counter, and the security camera above the register blinked once and went dark with everything else. I texted my friend Nate because he always answered no matter what time it was. "Bro, the whole city just went dark. You seeing this?" No response. Nate was the kind of kid who texted back before you put your phone down. We shared a desk in shop class, and he chewed the inside of his cheek when he was thinking. Rain hammered the roof, and nothing else made a sound. Something banged against the side of the building, and I dove behind the counter with my heart hammering. Wind was rattling the propane cage outside. I shoved a toppled display back up with shaking hands and laughed at myself for jumping. A knock on the glass. I spun, and a woman was standing in the rain holding a sleeping toddler against her chest. She knocked again, and her face was desperate through the wet glass. I flipped the lock and pulled the door open. "Can I just get gas? My daughter's asleep, and I'm almost on empty." The toddler's head was on her shoulder, and one tiny fist was clutching a stuffed elephant, and she was drooling onto her mom's shirt. Of course, pumps are down, but I can flip the manual override in the back. "Thank you so much. We've been driving for 40 minutes trying to find somewhere open. My husband's deployed, and it's just me and her, and I've been going in circles in the dark." I handed her a paper towel, and she wiped the rain off the toddler's face, and the little girl scrunched her nose and squeezed the elephant tighter without waking up. She could sleep through a hurricane. She basically is. The woman laughed.
How could she sleep through a hurricane? A tornado?
And the relief of having another person loosened the knot in my chest. "I'm Caleb, Michelle, and this is Lily." I noticed a name tag safety pinned to the elephant's ear, Ellie, in wobbly marker. Michelle caught me squinting at it. She named it herself. Can't spell yet, but she got close. She bounced Lily and hummed something, and Lily's fist tightened on Ellie's trunk in her sleep, and Michelle kissed the top of her head. "We'll be home soon, baby." The gas station felt warmer and smaller with them in it, and the blackout didn't matter. I went to the back room to flip the manual pump switch. I could hear Michelle laughing at something Lily did in her sleep. The front door chimed behind me. I came back out and my stomach dropped through the floor. 3 men in ski masks and gloves inside the gas station. The biggest one already behind the counter. The second flipping the lock. The third 2 feet from Michelle. She yanked Lily against her chest, and the girl woke up with gloves inside the gas station. The biggest one already behind the counter, the second flipping the lock, the third 2 feet from Michelle. She yanked Lily against her chest, and the girl woke up whimpering, and Michelle's face went white, and everything warm about the last 10 minutes died. "Nobody moves." He grabbed my collar, and I swung at him, and he caught my wrist and slammed it down, and had a zip tie cranked around both wrists before I could swing the other. I kicked, and he pinned my legs and dragged me to the counter and zip-tied my hands to the metal shelf underneath. I yanked immediately, and the shelf rattled, and he kicked me in the ribs so hard something cracked, and I curled around the pain but kept pulling. He crouched and ripped my name tag off. "Caleb, I know your name. When this is over, you forget everything." He pointed at Michelle. "That baby stops crying or we have a problem." Lily was wailing. Michelle pressed the girl's face against her shoulder and rocked, and the terror on her face gutted me so completely. I pulled at the zip tie until my skin tore and blood ran down both forearms and dripped off my elbows. Michelle saw it, and her face crumpled, and she mouthed, stop, but I shook my head and kept pulling. The big one ripped the cash drawer out and bills scattered. 300? That's it? He swept the drawer off the counter and it crashed into the chips. We hit the houses. No alarms, no cameras. This is home base. He pulled a list of addresses from his pocket. The small one crouched in front of Lily, his head tilted, almost gentle. How old? Michelle's voice shook. 18 months. The gentleness vanished when he straightened up. Keep her quiet. Two of them went out into the dark. The small one stayed, jittery, pacing. His mask was crooked, and I could see his jaw, and something about it tugged at the back of my brain. The way he chewed the inside of his cheek. I'd seen someone do that every day in shop class.
No, imagine.
The second they left, I
I
started
think it
pulling
is.
at the shelf. The screws were loose in the old wood. I braced my feet and pulled, and my cracked ribs screamed, and I bit down until I tasted blood, and the screws ripped free. I flattened behind the counter. The security camera had a tiny green light. Battery backup. Still recording. I grabbed the scissors and sawed through the zip tie, and it snapped, and blood was running down both wrists, and relief surged so hard through me, my head spun. The fire extinguisher. Red metal. 10 feet. He turned from the
He
window
literally
and walked toward
started
Michelle.
5
Your
months.
car
How is he that popular? Let's see how much views this video already has. Okay. 300, that's not that much. It is a lot, but not that much, like. 4,000 4K views right now?
running,
It was
she
just
nodded.
at
Keys.
300.
She pulled back. Please, her car
4K.
seat's in there. He grabbed for the keys, and she twisted, and Lily screamed, and the fury was so instant and blinding, my body moved before my brain caught up. I ripped the extinguisher off the wall and swung at the back of his legs, and he went down hard. He rolled and kicked me in the stomach, and I doubled over but held on. I swung again, and his shoulder crunched, and he crashed into the chip display, and the whole unit toppled, and cans and glass exploded everywhere. He grabbed a bottle and hurled it at my head, and I ducked, and it shattered against the wall. I charged and swung low and caught his knee, and he buckled. Ellie was on the floor between us, staring up with button eyes. I slammed the extinguisher into his chest, and he let go. Michelle, run! Your car! She sprinted for the door with Lily screaming. I shoved through the back room door and slammed it and threw my weight against it, and he hit it from the other side so hard my feet slid. I jammed the mop handle through the door handle and burst out the back exit. Michelle's van was at the pump. She was turning the key, and the engine clicked dead. She'd been running it for 40 minutes. Dead battery. The panic was choking me. I sprinted to the hood and slammed my palms on it. Pop it! She was shaking so hard she couldn't find the latch. Lily was screaming in the back. Michelle, the hood! She found it, and I ripped the cables and dried the terminals with my shirt, and inside the store the mop handle cracked. He was almost through. Try now! Click. Nothing. I slammed the battery housing and corrosion crumbled off the terminal. Again! Click. The engine coughed and died. The back door was splintering. I grabbed both terminals and squeezed them against the posts with my bare hands. Now! The engine caught and roared, and I yanked my hands free and slammed the hood. Drive! Don't stop! What about drive? She tore out, and the taillights vanished. I sprinted to the front and hauled the door shut with my bloody hands slipping and grabbed the padlock from the propane cage, and it took 3 tries to snap it through. He was locked inside, pounding on the glass. The back door splintered open behind me. He was getting out, headlights coming fast. The other 2. The van pulled in, and the big one jumped out. What happened? He got out. Woman's gone. The big one scanned the dark. I was behind the air pump 15 feet away. Find him. I ran. Vaulted the fence, and my ribs screamed, and I stumbled through a backyard. Fence rattling behind me. Boots on grass. I cut through a yard, and a motion light clicked on, and I was lit up, and I dove over the next fence and landed in a garden and kept running. I shoved through a hedge, and thorns ripped
His
my
ribs are
arms
probably hurt so bad.
and came out on a pitch-black street and sprinted 3 blocks.
My ribs broke when I was 10. Yeah, imagine how I used to cry and scream whenever I fell. Don't ask how I fell. I slipped, and my ribs broke.
And ducked into an alley behind a dumpster. Flashlight beams at the end of the alley. Check over
I
here.
got rushed to the ER.
pressed my face into my knees and pulled my feet in, and the beam swept past the dumpster 6 inches from my shoes. He's gone. Come on, we're losing time on the houses. Boots fading. They went back to robbing the neighborhood. I stayed behind the dumpster, shaking and crying from exhaustion. Then I heard screaming, not from the gas station, from a house 2 streets over. A woman screaming, "Get out of my house," and glass breaking, and I could hear it cutting through the rain, and I knew exactly what was happening. They were inside someone's home. I should have stayed behind the dumpster. I should have waited for the sirens, but Michelle's face flashed through my head, and the sound of Lily crying, and I was terrified. But I shoved myself up and ran toward the screaming. A little yellow house with the front door kicked open. I crouched behind the porch railing and dialed 911 with shaking bloody fingers. 3 men robbing a house on Miller Street. Yellow house. Broken front door. There's a woman inside screaming. I hung up. Inside, I could hear them tearing through cabinets, and the woman was sobbing. I grabbed a garden gnome off the porch next door and hurled it through the side window of the robber's van, and the alarm erupted. The big one came crashing through the front door, and I was already running. He saw me in the streetlight for half a second. It's the kid from the station. Both of them came after me. I sprinted down the alley, and the big one was fast for his size, and I could hear his breathing getting closer. I cut left and grabbed a recycling bin and threw it behind me, and plastic bottles exploded across the pavement, and he tripped and went down hard and cursed. I vaulted a chain link fence and dropped into a yard, and there was nowhere left to run, so I crawled under a deck and pressed myself flat against the dirt, and cobwebs stuck to my face, and something skittered across my hand, and I clamped my jaw shut to keep from screaming. Boots on the pavement above me, flashlight beams sweeping through the fence slats. The light crept along the edge of the deck 6 inches from my face. Check under there. We don't have time. That alarm's gonna bring every neighbor on the block. We go now. The van peeled out. I crawled out from under the deck and spit dirt out of my mouth and stumbled back to the yellow house. The old woman was standing in her doorway in a bathrobe, clutching a phone and shaking. "Are you okay?" They took my mother's jewelry box. It was the only thing I had left of her. Her voice broke, and I grabbed the porch railing because my legs were about to give out. "The police are on their way." I called them. She looked at my wrists. The gauze from the zip ties had soaked through, and blood was dripping off my fingers onto her welcome mat. "Oh, honey, you're bleeding everywhere." "I'm okay." "You are not okay. You're a child." She went inside and came back with a dish towel and wrapped it around my worst wrist and tied it tight, and her hands were gentle and steady, even though she'd just been robbed. "What's your name?" "Caleb." "Caleb, why on earth did you run toward this house?" "Because I could hear you screaming." She pressed her hand against my cheek, and her eyes filled up. I heard sirens getting closer, and I turned and ran back toward the gas station because the night wasn't over. The parking lot was dark and empty. The padlock was on the front door, but the back door was hanging off its hinges. I stepped through, and glass crunched under my shoes. The store was trashed, chips and soda and broken glass and the cash drawer on the floor. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from where I'd dropped it. Then I heard breathing behind the ice freezer. I raised the extinguisher and crept toward the sound. The green glow of the security camera lit up a face, and I stumbled backward. Nate Mitchell. I'd known that jaw. I'd been staring at it all night through the crooked mask, and my brain had been screaming at me to recognize it, and I wouldn't let myself. 4th grade. He came to my birthday party, and we ate so much cake we both threw up. Shared headphones in study hall every single day for 2 years. He was holding his shoulder where I'd hit him with the extinguisher, and tears were running down his face. Nate, Caleb. A woman and a baby were in this store. A little girl with a stuffed elephant was screaming on the floor while you stood over her. He flinched at every word. I told them the station was closed. I told my brother, "Your brother kicked my ribs in. He's my brother." I couldn't say no. "You could have said no. You have my number. You sat next to me in study hall yesterday." "I know." He pressed his face into his hands. He said nobody gets hurt. Quick money. My brother got out of county 6 months ago, and he showed up at my house and said he had a plan, and I was going to help. You could have said no. "You've met my brother." He was right. I had just met his brother, the man who cracked my rib and ripped a cash register apart with his bare hands. He moved into my room, took my bed, ate my food, told me I owed him because he didn't snitch on me for something I didn't even do. Nate wiped his face. "I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you what happened." Headlights swept through the windows. The van was back. Nate's face went white. "They're back. My brother won't leave without me." He grabbed my arm. "If he finds you here, he's not letting you walk out." The flashlight cut through the broken back doorway. The big one ducked in, and he looked even bigger in the dark, and his boots crunched on glass. He was carrying a crowbar from the van. "Nate, let's go." Nate squeezed my arm. "Stay down." He stood up. "I'm here." The flashlight hit his face. "Where's the kid?" "Gone." He ran. The big one grabbed Nate by the collar and shoved him toward the back door. Nate stumbled and planted his
sad
feet.
guy.
Wait, we don't wait. I said wait. The big one swung the flashlight beam around the store, and it landed on me, crouched behind the aisle, and I could feel it on my face like a heat lamp. He's still here? He shoved Nate aside and came down the aisle with the crowbar raised, and he was twice my size, and the fury on his face was volcanic. You locked my boy in. You let the woman go. You called the cops on us at that house. I raised the extinguisher. That's not going to stop me. I squeezed the handle and sprayed him point blank, and he screamed and staggered, clawing at his eyes, and crashed into the cooler door.
A
and
tricky
glass
move.
shattered. The second guy
He's
came
the
from back door.
underdog.
Nate stepped into the aisle between us. He spread his arms wide and planted his feet. Enough! The second guy stopped. Nate's brother was screaming and wiping his eyes. Get out of my way! No! Nate, I swear to God, move! This is my friend. His voice cracked. His mom drove me to school when mine wouldn't. She packed me lunch because nobody packed mine. I sat next to him every day for 2 years, and he never once made me feel like I was less than anyone. He was crying and shaking and half the size of his brother, and he didn't move. I'm done. I did this because you told me to, and I watched a baby scream on a floor because of us, and I'm done. His brother lunged around him with the crowbar, and Nate grabbed his arm, and they crashed into the shelf, and cans rained down, and I swung the extinguisher and connected with the brother's back, and he dropped the crowbar and howled. The second guy bolted for the back door. Nate and his brother were on the ground, and Nate was holding his brother's arm with both hands, screaming, "Stop!" And I kicked the crowbar down the aisle and grabbed the front door key ring off the wall, and my bloody hands dropped it twice, and I yanked the padlock free and threw the door open. Red and blue flooding the parking lot. 3 cruisers, officers pouring in. 3 inside. They rushed past me and pulled all 3 out in handcuffs. The brother was still wiping his eyes and cursing. Nate came out last. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye, and his hands were cuffed behind him, and he was 17 years old. His face found mine across the parking lot, and he held my eyes, and neither of us blinked. The kid who stood between his brother and me with his arms spread was being loaded into a cruiser, and I pressed both hands over my face. The security camera, battery backup, green-tinted footage of the whole night. The officer played it on his laptop. 3 men entering, me on the floor, Michelle holding Lily, me breaking free, the extinguisher, and at the end, Nate stepping between his brother and me with his arms wide. We have everything on camera, including that kid stepping in front of a crowbar for you. The paramedic wrapped my wrists in white gauze. These are deep. You'll have scars. Michelle's minivan pulled into the lot. She got out, and Lily was asleep in the car seat with Ellie tucked under her arm. Michelle crossed the parking lot and walked straight into me and held on shaking. You told me to run. You needed to run. She's okay. My baby's okay because of you. She brought Lily over and put her in my arms, and she weighed nothing and smelled like baby shampoo, and her tiny hand curled around my finger, and I choked up because this little girl was safe and had no idea what happened tonight. My mom showed up in her bathrobe, police scanner in the kitchen. She grabbed my face and saw the bandages and the bruise and pulled me in so hard my ribs screamed. You're done working nights. Mom, you're done. I buried my face in her shoulder because I was 16, and I'd fought 3 grown men twice and saved a woman from a house, and I wanted my mom, and she was here. The old woman from Miller Street gave a statement. She described the kid who threw a gnome through the van window, and the dispatcher confirmed my 911 call. He ran toward the screaming, she told the officer. Everyone else would have run away. Nate wrote me from county, 1 page. I stepped in front of my brother because you swung a fire extinguisher for a baby you didn't even know. I want to be the kind of person who does that. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. I screenshot it and almost posted it to my Snapchat story, and then put my phone down because some things aren't for the internet. I read it twice. The register was replaced, but the dent in the counter from where his brother ripped the drawer out was still there. My first day shift, I found Ellie behind the shelf where she'd rolled during the fight. I picked her up and put her on the counter. Michelle came in a week later with Lily on her hip, and the little girl pointed and screamed, "Ellie!" And I handed it to her, and she hugged it against her face. Michelle grabbed my hand and held it. She didn't need to say anything. I squeezed back. Lily was already toddling toward the candy aisle like nothing had ever happened in this building.
Wow, that was a banger. 16 minutes. That was a banger.
Send professional
We're gonna keep.
invoices
We're gonna.
faster.
I'm gonna do part 2, part 3, everything. Let's actually go into the shorts.
The firefly bit me at a cookout. I dropped my burger and texted my boss. I quit because I knew I'd just been chosen. I'd seen every superhero movie ever made. A bug bites you. You wake up swinging between skyscrapers. My brother asked if fireflies even have teeth, and I told him destiny doesn't answer stupid questions. I gave my myself 1 week to master my powers and find my first bad guy. Day 1, I stood in my living room and snapped my wrist at the wall like I'd practiced 100 times. Nothing came out but a sneeze. I figured my powers just needed to warm up. Day 3, something twitched on my back, and 2 wings the size of my thumbnails unfolded behind me. I screamed so loud my neighbor banged on the wall. I could fly. I climbed onto my window ledge 2 floors up, spread my arms, and jumped. The wings flapped exactly hard enough to do absolutely nothing. I went straight down into the dumpster behind my building. Lying in a pile of banana peels, I noticed my hands were glowing. Not glowing cool, glowing like a nightlight in the middle of a sunny afternoon, where nobody could even tell. That was my big superpower. Not webs, not flying, not super strength. Just a human glow stick that was completely useless. The harder I panicked about wasting my one shot at being special, the brighter I burned, and I sat in that dumpster, ready to give up. That night, I walked to the corner store, still glowing, ready to tell everyone the Firefly thing was a bust. 2 guys came sprinting out with the register in their arms, headed right for the car parked behind me. I was so scared, I lit up like a stadium, so both of them threw their arms over their eyes and ran face first into the streetlight pole. They dropped on the sidewalk next to the busted register, out cold. I stood there glowing over 2 knocked out robbers, and the superpower I swore was useless had just stopped a robbery. I jumped up and down, then dropped to my knees crying, because I really was special. Spider-Man could never. When a firefly bit me at a cookout, I dropped my...
Okay, let's go to popular. Oh, these are gonna be good. I just know it.
My twin brother Chris and I were 9 when we learned Morse code. We tapped messages under the dinner table when Mom told us to stop talking and tapped through the wall between our bedrooms every night. When Chris got into a car accident and the doctor said he'd never wake up, I pulled up a chair next to his bed, took his hand, and tapped. Are you there? Nothing. But I came back the next afternoon and tapped again. Before I left, I always said the same thing. See you tomorrow, Chris. A week later, Chris's fingers twitched against mine, and I almost fell out of my chair. I grabbed a nurse, and she barely looked up. They're reflexes. It doesn't mean anything. I bought a notebook the next day and started writing down every single one. 4 months in, Mom watched me scribbling and said, "How long are you gonna keep doing this? Until he taps back." He's not gonna tap back. You're talking to a corpse. Dad lasted a few more months before he pulled me into the hallway. We need to talk about donating your brother's organs. His fingers move every time I hold his hand, Dad. The nurses said those are reflexes. Stop getting your hopes up, son. I don't care what the nurses say. You're not donating my brother's organs. But a week later, my parents called to have Chris transferred to a long-term facility to die and scheduled a meeting to sign the papers. The afternoon before the meeting, I tapped into his palm like always, but this time, something tapped back. Short, short, short. Long, long, long. Short, short, short. SOS. I grabbed his hand. Chris, if that's you, squeeze once. He squeezed so hard my knuckles cracked. I stormed into the meeting room and told them my brother just responded to me. The caseworker said, "This is very common with families who aren't ready to let go." My parents nodded. I grabbed the transfer papers off the table. "You're not signing anything until you come see for yourself." I walked them to Chris's bed and grabbed his hand. "Ask him anything." The caseworker asked what year it was. Chris squeezed out the answer. Count to 5. 5 perfect squeezes. His mother's name, tapped out letter by letter. By the 10th question, she said, "He's still alive. We can't move him." Weeks later, I asked Chris what kept him fighting when everyone gave up. Heard Mom call me a corpse. Heard Dad say donate my organs. Heard all of them leave, except you. I asked why. I wanted to see you too. My twin brother Chris and I were not. The flight attendant slipped me a napkin that said, "The pilot isn't who he says he is. Meet me in the back to talk." I knew she chose to tell me because of the military dog tags around my neck. I folded the napkin and slid it into my pocket, and that's when the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Hopkins, expecting smooth skies to Chicago." But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I waited 2 minutes and casually walked to the back, not knowing what to expect. The flight attendant was there with a man holding up a police badge. The man whispered, "I'm glad you're here. I'm an undercover cop." I knew something was wrong straight away. The flight attendant whispered, "I've flown with Captain Hopkins for 6 years. I don't exactly know what's wrong, but I know that's not Hopkins, and we're flying the wrong way." She showed me the flight map of where we were heading. The plane is heading toward an abandoned airport. I leaned over the map. My body was pumping with adrenaline because it was the perfect place to crash a plane. There's an empty space above the pilot's room. I can climb up and listen to what the pilot and co-pilot are planning through the ceiling. Take my number. If you can tell there's something fishy going on, text me one word. Now. That's the signal to move. And to distract everyone while I climbed above the ceiling, the flight attendant made an announcement on the speakers to tell everyone to keep their seatbelts on. Through the cracks, I could hear 2 men in the pilot's room talking. 15 years ago today, our brother died because of Captain Hopkins. Now we get to crash his plane with him tied up on it while we impersonate him. I texted the undercover cop. Now, the cart slammed into the pilot's room door, and the cop kicked it open. I dropped through the ceiling and tackled the fake pilot out of his seat. The cop pinned the co-pilot to the floor. The flight flight attendant grabbed the radio. Mayday, our pilot is gone. We need help landing right now. She looked at me. Find Hopkins, the actual pilot. He has to be on this plane somewhere. I sprinted to the back of the plane, checking every door. I yanked open the closet next to the bathrooms, and Captain Hopkins was inside with his hands tied and tape across his mouth. I ripped the tape off. Get me to the controls. He ran to the front and dropped into the pilot's chair. He grabbed the wheel. Tower, this is the real Captain Hopkins. I'm landing this plane. When we finally landed, the cops dragged the brothers off in handcuffs. The flight attendant came up to me in the aisle. I pulled the napkin out of my pocket and held it up. You saved 200 lives with this. She smiled and took it back. The flight attendant slipped me a napkin that...
This quiz reveals your...
Every time we heard a knock on the front door, my dad would yell, "Stealth mode," and we had 30 seconds to kill every light in the house. My brother and I would race through the
Oh
rooms,
yeah, I forgot. Goat.
flipping switches, yanking
Called Goat.
cords, shutting off the TV mid-show, while some guy outside banged on the front door yelling, "I know you're in there,
No,
but..."
they're watching his story, and I'm watching his story.
Dad timed us. Once everything was dark, no talking, no moving, no looking out the window.
They're in his story. They're watching his story, and they're in his story, and I'm watching his story.
We'd sit there until Dad did his owl hoot, which meant all clear. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes almost an hour. Afterwards, he'd
1
high-five
hour.
us and go, "Real ninjas couldn't do better." He told us stealth mode was top secret. Never tell your teachers, your friends, nobody. Other people wouldn't understand. For years, I believed him. When I was 8, I asked Dad why we had to hide so much. He said some annoying guy kept bothering our family, and stealth mode was how we dealt with him. I felt proud we had a secret skill that could outsmart bad guys. By the time I was 10, I heard the voice outside yell something about a bet and $20. I tugged Dad's sleeve and whispered, "Is the bad guy trying to steal our money?" Dad
That's not
shushed me
that
so
much.
hard I flinched. When I was 12, I broke the window rule, peeked through the blinds, and saw a completely normal guy in a polo shirt standing on the porch rubbing his forehead. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone's tired uncle. At 13,
Dwayne The
I
Rock
told Dad I
Johnson.
was just going to open the door and tell the guy to leave us alone. The color left his face. You absolutely cannot do that. That was the first time stealth mode didn't feel like a game. By 15 or 16, it barely happened anymore. But when it did, Dad would peek through the blinds looking guilty. Mom just shook her head from the couch and muttered something under her breath. I was 17 and home alone when I heard it. "I know you're in there. It's been 12 years, man." I opened the front door. The guy nearly fell backwards. Normal-looking dude, middle-aged, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Oh, hi. Is your dad home? I'm his old college roommate." He held up the paper. "Your old man bet me $20 Michael Jordan wouldn't win his 6th ring. That was 1998. I've been knocking on this door ever since." He handed me the IOU, both their signatures, right there at the bottom. I left it on the kitchen table. Mom saw it first and laughed so hard she had to hold the counter. Dad picked it up, read it, put it back down, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "So now he knows someone's home." Then he turned off the kitchen light and got under the table. We were never in danger. My dad just lost a bet because of the greatest of all time. My daughter came home crying because her teacher doesn't know what color blood is. The first time I realized something was wrong, Riley came home from school holding out her arm, looked at
The best NBA player is LeBron and Michael Jordan, and the soccer players is Ronaldo and Messi.
You can see the blue-
And then there's only one best football. It's Patrick Mahomes.
blood in my veins right here. She traced the blue lines under her skin with her finger. I put down my coffee and looked at her. "Actually, sweetheart, that's not true. Blood is always red because of hemoglobin. It's just darker red in your veins." Her face scrunched up. But Mrs. Miller showed us a whole PowerPoint about it. She even had diagrams from a science book. The next morning, I packed my work scrubs in my bag. I'm an
Wait,
ER
what?
home crying with an F because her teacher doesn't know what color blood is. The first time I realized something was wrong, Riley came home from school holding out her arm. "Look, Dad, you can see the blue blood in my veins right here." She traced the blue lines under her skin with her finger. I put down my coffee and looked at her. "Actually, sweetheart, that's not true. Blood is always red because of hemoglobin. It's just darker red in your veins." Her face scrunched up. But Mrs. Miller showed us a whole PowerPoint about it. She even had diagrams from a science book. The next morning, I packed my work scrubs in my bag. I'm an ER nurse at Mercy General, and I was working the afternoon shift anyway. I sent Mrs. Miller an email asking if I could do a quick presentation about blood for career day that afternoon. She loved the idea. When I arrived, Mrs. Miller introduced me as Riley's dad, who works at the hospital. 28 kids stared up at me from their desks. I heard you guys learned that blood is blue inside your body, I said. The entire class nodded enthusiastically. Mrs. Miller beamed from her desk in the corner. I pulled out a blood collection tube from my pocket and held it up. This is what we use to draw blood at the hospital. Notice something. The tube creates a vacuum. No oxygen inside at all. I paused. When we draw blood with these, it never touches oxygen until we pop the cap off.
I have never knew that. I always thought blood was blue. Because blood is blue!
I showed them photos on my phone of sealed...
Let me search it up. Hold on, let me search it up in my iPhone. Wait, I just realized. Blood is red. Then why is my blood blue? I'm so... Is that concerning?
blood tubes. See? Still red. Mrs. Miller's smile started fading. She shifted in her chair and cleared her throat. A boy raised his hand and pointed to their science textbook. But our textbook says it's blue. I picked up the book and checked the publication date, 1998. Medicine updates pretty fast. We used to think lots of things that turned out to be wrong. Mrs. Miller suddenly stood up from her desk, her hands gripping the edge. Well, thank you for that interesting presentation, Mr. Johnson, but we need to move on to math now. I nodded and started packing when a girl in the back raised her hand. So our textbook is wrong? The class erupted in whispers. Mrs. Miller's jaw clenched and her voice got tight. The curriculum says, actually, I interrupted, pulling up the state science standards on my phone. I walked over and turned my phone toward her. The current curriculum specifically mentions this myth as something to correct. She stared at the screen and her eyes narrowed. Her mouth pressed into a thin line and her nostrils flared. Can I speak with you in the hallway? The kids watched as we walked out and the door closed behind us. Do you have any idea how hard it is when parents undermine my authority? Her face was red and her voice was sharp. Now they'll question everything I say. I kept my voice calm. Isn't that exactly what we want them to do? Question things and learn critical thinking? She crossed her arms tightly. I've been teaching for 22 years. I'm not changing my whole curriculum because some nurse thinks he knows better than our textbooks. The next day, I found out Mrs. Miller gave the class a pop quiz. Riley came home crying, her face red and puffy. Her hands were shaking as she handed me a paper with a big red F on it. I took a deep breath and felt my jaw tighten as I looked at the question. What color is blood inside the body? Riley had written red, and Mrs. Miller had marked it wrong. I requested a meeting with Principal Davis and brought printouts of medical textbooks, the state science standards, and Riley's quiz. The principal called in Mrs. Miller and asked her directly, is blood blue inside the body? After a long pause, Mrs. Miller said, it's what the children understand better. I leaned forward in my chair. My daughter is crying every morning before school because she's afraid of getting F's for writing down the truth. The next day, the school replaced their science books. Now whenever Riley learns something new at school, she comes home and asks me, Dad, is this actually true or is it just a Mrs. Miller truth? My daughter came home crying with an F because her teacher doesn't know what color blood.
Okay.
What? I became my school's hero for 1 minute before everyone watched what happened next. I don't play around when it comes to Halloween, so during our school's Halloween dance, I dressed up in real firefighter gear from my dad's closet. Real jacket, real boots, real helmet.
Whoa.
I strutted around the gym like I owned the
That's
place
cool.
until the fog machine popped like a toaster and the fire alarm went off. Everyone cheered thinking it was part of the show until I smelled burnt plastic. Teachers started waving their arms, telling everyone to stay calm, but I noticed the orange extension cord powering the machine didn't stop at the wall. It ran out the side doors and down the hallway toward the science wing. Then someone near the door yelled, smoke in the hallway, and teachers started shouting for everyone to evacuate. Real sirens started wailing outside and fire trucks pulled up. The crowd poured into the parking lot while firefighters rushed through the main doors. That's when one of them spotted me standing near the entrance in full gear. You, with us, he shouted. We're clearing the east wing. I opened my mouth to say I'm just a student, but he shoved a flashlight into my hand and pushed me forward. The hallway was dark and filled with smoke. We followed the orange cord past the lockers until it disappeared under Mrs. Carter's classroom door. One of the firefighters reached for the handle and jerked back. Hot, he said.
What
Then
was
looked at me.
that?
Hit it! But I only had my foam axe. I swung as hard as I could and it bounced off with a pathetic squeak. The firefighter grabbed it, swung himself, and the foam bent in half. He stared at it, muttered, these damn budget cuts, and tossed it aside. That's when someone shouted from down the hall and he waved to the others. Forget this door. We'll circle back once we've got tools. They started heading back down the hall, but then I heard it. A squeaky wheel spinning frantically. This was Mrs. Carter's room, and the class pet Mr. Nibbles was still inside. I turned back to the door. The handle was glowing red. I wrapped my jacket sleeve around my arm and threw my shoulder into the bottom panel until it cracked open. Smoke poured out and choked me instantly. The hamster cage was on the counter and tiny flames were eating the papers around it. I grabbed the melted cord with my sleeve and yanked it from the wall. A spark bit through the fabric straight into my skin and I screamed
How's that
but kept
true?
pulling until the plug came loose. I grabbed the cage with my smoking sleeve and the metal seared into my palm. I could smell my skin burning. breathing. My lungs felt like they were filled with glass, and my vision was going black around the edges, but I ran. When I burst through the side door, I collapsed face first onto the concrete and threw Mr. Nibbles onto the grass so I wouldn't crush him. I could hear cheering as hands grabbed me, and someone pulled off my helmet. A firefighter was staring down at me. "Kid, you're a hero." That's when I heard the scream. I turned my head and watched a hawk swoop down, grab Mr. Nibbles in its talons, and fly away. I became my school's hero for
1 second. That'll be it for today. Peace.